Hello, Wolfpack. Nice of you to drop by your old acquaintance Dr. Cat's office. Ready for your appointment? Because we have an exquisite feast for the eyes, as well as your nightmares. Tonight, we're dishing out our thoughts on the entire Hannibal Lecter franchise to demonstrate the value within this iconic horror jewel and inform you on all his greatest hits and his epic fails. Don't worry, there aren't too many poor performances from this artwork, since if you can believe it or not, the Hannibal Lecter franchise is sincerely one of the best horror collections of all time. This devil among mortals is without a doubt a cinematic master of fear and cherished as a classic horror monster by many terror fans. For those unfamiliar with the legend, Dr. Hannibal Lecter from the Thomas Harris Scary Stories was a former psychologist and frequent police consultant who soon revealed that he was actually an ingenious serial killer mastermind and monstrous cannibal lurking in the shadows. While he has a lifetime of grisly misadventures on his resume, most know the character from the popular Silence of the Lambs, Red Dragon, and hit Hannibal TV show. What earned his mark on horror history is that Dr. Lecter was the earliest example of a character archetype I like to refer to as the gentleman psychopath. Hannibal was a very unique horror baddie, as he wasn't a cheesy one-liner machine like Freddy or Chucky, he wasn't the silent slasher like Jason or Mikey, he wasn't super-powered like Pinhead or Candyman, and he wasn't a total raving lunatic like Norman or Jack, but rather Dr. Lecter was suave, charismatic, eerily friendly to those who show respect, cooperative, and immensely intelligent. However, his charm and wit hid the savage monster he really is underneath. What makes Dr. Lecter so scary is that he's incredibly unpredictable. One second he can go from a noble sweetheart, but the instant he's triggered, he can transform into a barbaric sadist, drenched in blood. Hannibal is a more subtle horror monster. He embodies the terrifying yet complex mindset of real-world serial killers. The entire saga, in fact, shows off that unsettling universe without error. To Lecter and the other villains in his series, killing people isn't just for fun or revenge, but murder is an art. These loons are artists who look beyond the meaning of death, and to them, the act of taking life should be for a divine reason, where the nightmare fuel is supplied by these films and shows, gazing upon the deranged minds of serial killers. This is a more so psychological horror series, rather than the simple popcorn thrillers like Elm Street or Predator. I and the Fannables absolutely love this flavor of storytelling, since it makes for prime horror meat, gives us super deep heroes and villains walking through our grim world, and naturally, the haunting inhuman terror found from this franchise. It's the kind of terror that doesn't just shock you in the moment, but it stays with you when it's over. The Hannibal Lecter saga is a great scary world because it manages to stay grounded and displays the true sick things ordinary human beings can do. This is a saga which has totally built its own castle. Now, despite being the mascot of the franchise, Dr. Lecter is not always the main focus in his own series. He's just popular. There's other main characters, heroes, and even enemies who absorb more screen time than he does. In fact, it's actually actually a grand achievement that Hannibal's best-known actor, Anthony Hopkins, received many awards for Best Actor in Silence of the Lambs despite only being on screen for less than half an hour. Yep, he was that good. But my point remains that there were other great characters and plots, which some people don't even know about since the greatness of Lecter is impossible to overcome. Most people of course know the big titles, but they don't know or recall all titles. I'm a huge fan of this character and his epics, but I won't deny there were some bad times and weak moments too. Now, I would say this is all my opinion, but I think you're clever enough to know that already. So just respect my views and don't be rude, since we all know what happens to the rude in this world.
Oh, a parking ticket!
What are this icon's most delicious treats, and what are his sour grapes? Well, that's what we plan to dissect and learn. So grab your plates, along with some fava beans and a nice chianti, cause we're going in from the worst to best. This is my ranking of the Hannibal Lecter saga. And the award for worst Hannibal entry goes to The Clarice Show. Surprise! We're counting the TV shows in our ranking! And what better way to start our first video on a spectacular saga than with the most painful disappointment served to us from Paramount Plus's toilet. Brought to you by the same idiot who ruined Spider-Man, ruined Zorro, ruined Star Trek, and ruined Universal's Dark Universe. We get a foul cash grab following Special Agent Clarice Starling after her journey in Silence of the Lambs. Basically, these are Clarice's secret agent cases and mysteries she solved once she got her promotion in between Silence and Hannibal. To be honest, I don't think it was a bad idea for a show. Clarice is such a phenomenal hero and a true feminist role model. However, this is one of those shows which focuses way too much on her feminist icon status and diverse pals until it's ruined with crappy modern day politics. That's right, The Clarice Show is another piece of garbage streaming show overdosing on
the message.
This soils the show completely. It's a stupid woke glurge fest, more concerned with making poorly thought out, preachy political statements than telling us a good story. Heck, if that doesn't turn you off, this is another fail bomb created for us uneducated by Alex Kurtzman. Huh. That was weird. Not a cloud in the sky. For those who don't know, Alex is an infamous producer who has openly admitted that he makes shows purposefully political now, since he is more obsessed with granting new creators a preaching platform, rather than making fun tales like he used to. And Clarice is no exception. Even it is chock full of
the message.
Now, yes, in the books and movies, Clarice does face some discrimination for being a woman in a male-dominated field, since back then, female police officers were rare and usually got special treatment from overprotective male superiors. but in the movie, it was subtle and downplayed. Clarice was soft and innocent, but the entire movie has her evolve into a badass capable of squaring off with Buffalo Bill and even Hannibal himself. The TV show totally nerfs her, and shockingly, takes away everything that made her awesome. I am not even kidding. Clarice is ruined by her own show. The strong, independent woman we fell in love with is gone. When the show isn't preaching
The message.
Clarice and every other girl/ethnic character in this is getting victimized. It has so many scenes of Clarice or some non-white or non-hetero person getting oppressed and shoving a no frickin' duh lesson on how mistreating others is bad.
Reads like a dispatch from the no shit clinic.
It does this in every dang episode, and it loses all momentum the more they did it. One scene which actually made me laugh out loud is in the pilot, where Clarice is solving a mystery of some stranger silencing women. She gives the journalist this cringy speech on speaking up and no longer staying quiet, as the camera pans over all the black characters and plays a slave song in the end credits. Oh yeah, it's that kind of show.
The message.
Are you serious? This show is actually saying that being a woman who works a high-profile government job capturing criminals and making $1,000 a week is comparable to being a slave in the fields. This is stupid. But don't worry, there are so many other reasons why this hits rock bottom for me. The writers constantly remind you how great Silence was, but it's all bad member berries like Trek. They actually have a truly talented cast, but do nothing with them. Sergeant Abraham Ford from The Walking Dead plays Clarice's toxic man, mean boss, Agent Krendler. Remember him?
Washington is full of corn-pwned country pussy.
Aside from the fact that Abraham doesn't look a thing like Ray Liotta, the show is kinda split on what they want to do with him. They make him the douche boss, but surprisingly, they try to make him sympathetic later on, when he gets an arc about his family falling apart and has him start to respect Starling. In most shows, this wouldn't be a problem, but this is not the way the character is in the book. Krendler was Clarice's rival, and not even half as nice as Abraham grows in this show. What's worse is that the show is trying to connect to the films, so why would they want us to feel for Krendler when, spoiler alert, he gets his brains eaten in Hannibal?
It's good.
I would like him getting depth, but I'm confused over whether or not he's a jerk with a heart of gold, or just the evil toxic whitey who hates whammon. Speaking of toxic idiots, Clarice's bestie, Ardelia, suddenly becomes a main protagonist now, and she sucks. Ardelia and Clarice were implied to be a lesbian couple in Silence, but this show practically spells that out to us 1,000 times. Ardelia was also a lovable nice girl who, while not as deep as Starling, was her greatest support in her hour of need. The two trust each other, help each other, and have the other's back. This being insane woke propaganda, which makes Star Trek Discovery look tame, quickly turns her into an ultra unlikable blacktivist whammon who spends all her screen time either being a victim or a racist witch. I swear, this chick might as well be Mikey Burnham, since that's the only way Alex writes black women now. They took a side character I honestly liked and somehow made her my most hated character in our torture. She spends all her time being oppressed by stupid men, joins the Black Coalition to fight back. Yes, seriously. has a racist stereotype of an African mother literally fresh off the boat, preaching how she should accept America and pride in her Ethiopian heritage. And worst of all, her long-ass subplot about her standing up to racism makes her look racist. She honestly breaks up with Clarice because she believes she can't trust her lesbian girlfriend for being white.
The message.
This chick was meant to relate to black women, but the white idiots writing her know nothing about reality, so as a result, this lady is plain unlikable.
And you would certainly make Director Hoover proud.
Well, Map,
You work so hard to protect his institution. I wonder if that's what bothers you most about me. That I'm more interested in protecting the people. Or is it just because I'm black?
Up yours, nigger.
Screw this bitch. She's worse than Ray Liotta. The other characters are total nothings, blank slates who either hate the women or suck Clarice's ego. Kumar is in this show, and he essentially does jack but make cute quips and cheer on the sidelines. I can't even remember half of Clarice's teammates. There's a sniper guy who I did enjoy, but like Kumar, he amounts to nada. There's cynical white nerd who did have a nice arc of coming around to appreciating Clarice as his true teammate, yet he also kind of fades away. And every other dude is a prick or a red shirt. The show is also so desperate to give you a strong female empowerment message that they actually bring back the senator lady, Ruth Martin, and her daughter Catherine to give them an arc of going from victims abused by the evil man into stronger lionesses who can take care of themselves, and it sucks.
The message.
They don't look a thing like the originals, and they are 100% used for a preachy moral that falls flat when they start doing questionable BS. According to Alex Kurtzman, the show didn't have copyright access to all the Hannibal characters, so most of the unique cast was adapted out, and they openly admitted that they had zero intention to ever bring Hannibal Lecter, the most vital character in Clarice's life, on board the series at all.
What the fuck?
The Clarice show is a Hannibal Lecter spin-off without the Deadly Doctor appearing in it at all. To the show's credit, there was some stuff I did like too. Since they had no access to Hannibal, they play up Buffalo Bill, and he is the highlight of the show, since Clarice hallucinates him as a boogeyman who traumatized her. I did like getting reminded that Buffalo Bill was a dangerous presence in his own right, and you do feel the impact he left, even long after he died. The mystery arc was also interesting, up until we find out what it was really all about. The entire series is about Clarice and her team uncovering a secret organization of human traffickers who are hiding in the country, but silencing any women for defying them.
Subtle!
I tried to look past the woke crap, but it was only leading to more obnoxious political statements as it trekked on.
The message.
The show is also super dull and boring. Without Hannibal or any full-on psychopaths at all, the series is ultimately a generic cop show. It feels more like a woke Law and Order or CSI, not a story about Clarice combating high-profile evildoers. Big shock, the show also ruins Clarice's character. Miss Starling is given the Picard treatment. She is deconstructed as a hero, victimized at every turn, has her happy ending overridden, gets yelled at by diverse people for not doing enough good, gets treated poorly by most of her coworkers, is betrayed by her racist girlfriend who we're meant to side with, suffers PTSD from Buffalo Bill, even though she was fine at the end of her movie.
Great continuity!
She gets abused a lot, gets locked up multiple times, needs everyone's approval, has to learn kindergarten lessons, and she just takes it all. The strong woman we loved is gone, and replaced by a sad, scared girl who cries a lot and apologizes to everyone for things out of her control. Honestly, I think Rebecca Breeds does a dang good job replicating Jodie Foster, but she is written horribly. This show, which was supposed to remind us how great Clarice is, just dumps all over her, and it's depressing. I'm glad they didn't make her a Mary Sue, but making her sheer effing hubris Picard was not an upgrade. But the point where this show won my wrath was the final scene. Throughout the show, Clarice has flashbacks to her dead heroic cop father, since he was her inspiration to become a detective, and even into her adulthood, she sought comfort in his memory. However, the show teases that her picture of him might not be what it seems. Guess what the twist is? No, really, guess. A heroic white male cop in a woke show could only have one direction. Clarice eventually learns that her loving daddy, who she worships, was a dirty, corrupt cop, and a pathetic coward who took bribes from gangbangers, was too much of a sissy to protect her, and she deluded herself into remembering him as a hero. Clarice soon realizes that her true angel was her mother all along, since as we all know, men are incapable of good. And the show actually ends with Clarice going back home to mend fences with her mommy, who abandoned her in the book and died in the movies, since she was a noble unsung hero the whole time, while her cop daddy was another bad man in her life.
Fuck you, 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 fuck you!
The message.
Yep, this show sucks. Believe me, there's tons I could prattle on about other than the politics, but we'd be here forever. It's just sad. You have an incredible character like Clarice Starling and endless potential to show us what she's accomplished in her life in between two good movies, and yet they want to focus on shallow politics. If you can somehow stomach the BS, the show is a bore and a sloppy mess. The bad guys have an evil scheme which makes no sense, since they go from selling sex slaves into liquefying women in a blender to drink their blood. The cast gets nothing juicy to work with. It's painfully unscary. Clarice suffers so much, and the show desperately tries to copy Hannibal's style. They shoot it like the art house angle of Brian Fuller's masterpiece, yet offer no substance to complement it at all. This show was so awful that it only lasted one season before the studio pulled the plug due to lackluster ratings. It's so bad and so dull that people didn't care to watch it. Another failure of a horror series when you can't outlive the 2000s Twilight Zone. And what's worse is that it didn't have to be this way, since I did think the show had potential and some nice moments, but the team did not understand why Clarice is great and that viewers are tired of
the message.
I don't recommend this show at all, even if you're a hardcore fanable, because it's as bad bad as most projects by Alex Kurtzman. What more can I say? This show sucks so much that it made me appreciate our next entry.
I have been mad at her for so long. She was just trying to protect me.
Next on our tray is the most hated of the movies, and allegedly the tale so bad it killed the franchise, Hannibal Rising. This was the prequel origin story detailing Hannibal Lecter's rise to power, explaining how he evolved into the man he is today, which is something none of the Fannibals ever wanted to see, as it completely robs the mystique and unknown from the character when it explains away everything and feels kind of sloppy by the end. A ton of people despise this adventure with a bloody passion, and understandably so, since there are quite a few negatives and missteps with our cunning cannibal. However, I surprisingly don't hate it. I actually found quite a few good elements in this.
Did he just say, aye, he did?
Okay, I won't deny that this movie has many faults, but I honestly don't think it's the worst chapter from the saga either. Thank you, Clarice. No, I don't view it as the bad one, but more like the weakest entry. Most fans view this as the black sheep among the films, and it's not hard to see why. This film feels less like a horror story and more like a superhero origin movie. Really, there are so few scary moments or intense dread that a lot of the time I forgot this was even a Hannibal movie. Seriously, if it wasn't for the fact that the characters remind you this guy is Hannibal Lecter, it feels like an action flick, like Taken or Batman Begins. I believe Hannibal Rising gets hate since it feels like it's its own separate entity completely, and they just slap the brand name to sell tickets. This is so disconnected. The story's also not very deep as the superior titles. Oddly enough, the plot skims through Hannibal's origin and quickly turns into a prequel adventure rather than a start of darkness. In the story, we see the tragic events unfold, leading up to Hannibal shaping his grim worldview, as his whole family gets slaughtered by Nazis during World War II. We trail a teen Hannibal, played by the late Gaspard Ulliel, who goes on a revenge spree, killing the Nazi war criminals who went into hiding after the war ended, and avenging the death of his sister Misha. And that's most of the story. Hannibal killing Nazis, led by the Lizard. It's a simple plot, but a fine concept. Though I'm sad to say that the Lizard and his Nazi gang are very lame, forgettable villains. It does lead to some cool moments where Lecter tortures and kills them with his set of skills, but you are not going to remember half these guys. The Hannibal saga has some of the most unsettling villains of horror, and the Lizard and his gang are just not interesting. There's also this very gross relationship between Hannibal and his Japanese aunt. It's so disturbing, but not for the reasons the writers intended. It kind of diminishes Lecter's dread whenever we see he has a soft spot for this woman who is essentially his guardian and made him weird rather than cunning. Luckily, as I said, there were some redeeming elements here. at least for me. Gaspard Ulliel is legit amazing as a young Hannibal. I am impressed by his sly performance. You truly buy that this kid is a younger version of Anthony Hopkins' character. If there's one good thing that came from this flick, it's that the kid playing young Lecter is truly great. He captures Hannibal's persona so well that he did make this movie easier to watch than that fail bomb. I kind of wish he got to play Lecter again in a better story. He's badass.
Do you see how your mouth stains the air? I should add that to my drawing. Would you like to see it?
I also do think there's some decent scary scenes in this, many of which are Hannibal slowly brutalizing the Nazi goons. My favorites include the horse quartering kill and the creepy one where Lecter drowns a Nazi assassin in the embalming tank. Seeing him nonchalantly kill foes like this does show shades of the villain he'll grow into. For a movie that folks consider the bad one, there's also some gorgeous cinematography and cool action in this, which does make it feel unique. Most bad horror sequels usually repeat the same old crap we've seen before, but this film manages to try out new ideas, which does earn more respect from me than most awful follow-ups. I was honestly getting into this movie's wild ride a few times and enjoying Hannibal's revenge spree, but tragically, my love was hindered by its weak direction. The movie was supposed to detail how Lecter became a cannibal, but it makes no sense. There's a quote-unquote twist ending where Hannibal comes to grips with what happened in his dark past, and it is so stupid. I mean, wouldn't the event turn him away from cannibalism? The last 10 minutes suck. I did not understand it, and the scene was super confusing. Hannibal Lecter's origin is simply weak, and robbed him of his mystery. Also, a criticism I do agree with is that this is the movie which turns Hannibal into a full-on anti-hero. Oh yeah, if you hate Ridley Scott's movie for making Lecter a misunderstood soul, well, you haven't seen this mess. Dr. Lecter is given a similar treatment as Rob Zombie's Michael Myers and Maleficent. They transform one of cinema's grandest villains into a poor, broken anti-villain who was forced into evil, and retcon in a tragic backstory to explain how he became this way. Can we please stop giving bad guys who we love to hate these pathetic sob stories to make us feel for them? It never works, since in spite of how tragic you make them, they're still destined to be evil bastards. I may love Gaspard Ulliel as this icon, but the writing for him gave him an equal amount of un-Hannibal-like elements. The final act of this movie is so anticlimactic as well. Despite solid build-up, its final minutes is where it got bad. The Lizard showdown with Lecter is not as good as his battle with Spidey, and the ending is mega abrupt. Hannibal embraces his role as villain, finishes the Nazis, breaks up with Gong Li, and starts anew in America, where he'll become the world's greatest psychologist. Even though he's still a wanted man by the European police, who know of his illegal activities.
That does not make sense!
Again, I don't hate this film, but it's underwhelming to say the least. I was enjoying myself and praising a few cool Hannibal scenes up until the stupid twist and rushed wrap-up made me realize why this was so hated. By the end, you really don't feel like you just watched a Hannibal movie, but a gritty action-adventure on par with Taken. The worst I think it gets is disappointing, but I don't think this is the worst horror sequel ever either. Guys, I have suffered awful horror tales. I've seen piss-poor Haunting Hour episodes, Killer Sponges, Freddy's Dead, Halloween 6, The Clarice Show, and even The Predator. I know bad horror. If this is what fans claim as the bad movie, then this franchise has fared better than most horror sagas. Rumor has it that Thomas Harris, the creator of the Hannibal books, never wanted to write this story, but was forced to by the studio since he was afraid somebody else would ruin his work. Yet amazingly, Thomas Harris writing a bad story is still better than Kurtzman attempting good stories. It's just a mediocre thriller, with some awesome scenes and good performances, but nowhere near the godlike levels of most Lecter art. I actually wouldn't turn anyone away from seeing this if curious, since there's some amusement from the tale, but I also don't blame you if you still see it as the worst of the films, since it does have lame choices too. Hannibal Rising admirably tries something new, but the lack of passion and cash grab motive does hold it back from evolving into something more.
I love you.
What is left you to love?
Good news, everyone! We're already at the gold movies! But the bad news is, this is where my opinion and personal biases are going to fully come into play. I just want to let you know that I love this franchise, and every entry from this point on is a fantastic tale of terror worthy of love. However, this is my ranking, so we're going to go from good movie to epic masterpieces based on my cat eyes. But I think we can all agree that these plots are fire in their own right, no matter what. With that said, next on my list is Manhunter.
Move this man!
Okay, let's get this out of the way. I do think Manhunter is an excellent movie. Sadly, it does make it low for me due to some issues I and a few fans do hold against it. Manhunter is the official first movie from the critically acclaimed Saga, as it's an adaptation of the first novel, Red Dragon. In this tale, we follow professional serial killer profiler Agent Will Graham as he works with his former best friend turned enemy, the incarcerated Dr. Lecter, to catch a new rising mass murderer known as the Great Red Dragon. This film's a total 80s movie, and I both love and detest it for that. The big reason why Manhunter is debated amongst fanables is that it is such a radical 80s action thriller to the point where it doesn't quite feel like a horror story. This flick's more so an 80s cop drama with some scary moments, and downplays the psychological horror well known from this series. I know it's cliche by today, but this story practically invented every cop cliche. Will Graham is a retired veteran officer reconnecting with fam, who of course comes out of retirement for one last job, where he works with colorful characters and pulls morally gray moves in order to catch the killer, and eventually rediscovers his heroic resolve in order to overcome the hardship he faces in his trials.
Go for Oscar Gold.
Predictable, yes, but this movie is riveting and intense enough to feel invested. My biggest gripe is not with the cliches though, but instead, I think this movie gets pretty slow in a few areas. Manhunter's a slow burn horror story, where they take their time setting up the drama before dropping it on you later. We don't even see the infamous Red Dragon Killer until the halfway point of this 2-hour movie, and once he does arrive, I was disappointed. I do like how we build up towards the killer a la Jaws, as that does make the Red Dragon much scarier when we don't see him early on. We only get to know him through his murder sprees. I only wish we didn't have to wait until the hour mark before this film gets totally off the rails, since before this gets good, it's a blimp of dull exposition and boring police procedural montages, which lower my score. I did grow to love this movie, but it's a tad too slow until we got to the parts I enjoyed. I also hate to tell you this, but sadly, Tom Noonan is my least favorite version of the Red Dragon.
You son of a...
I don't know why, but I just don't find him scary. I think the movie made him too much of an oddball outcast and took away a lot of his backstory that I simply didn't care for him. Now, Tom Noonan does have his threatening moments and is a true force of nature, but that's the thing, I found him menacing but not scary. More focus is given to him secretly being the killer instead of granting us a trip into his warped psyche, like in other adaptations. Not helping matters is that even his trademark killer outfit looks too funny to take seriously. After an hour of dread and sinister build-up, the Red Dragon at last makes his grand entrance, and try watching this without cracking a smile. I'm sorry, Tom. I know he got in ridiculous shape to appear dangerous, but it just did nada for me. However, don't mistake my negatives for hate, since I did love a lot about Manhunter. The second half of this movie is so epic, and spirals into straight up insanity that I found myself cheering how cool this got. The plot picks up speed ASAP once the dragon rises, and the more he terrorizes the city, the coppers get more dedicated to catching the baddie. It does feel truly intense the more desperate our heroes get, and it has one of the most over-the-top final battles I've ever seen. The climax is massively altered from the book, but it feels pretty darn epic. I never thought I'd ever say this about a horror story, but Manhunter also contains one of the most kick-ass soundtracks of this saga. I love the music in this movie because it's totally 80s and made this wild. How can you not feel pumped by this orchestra? I know this will also piss off the Fannibals, but I don't care. William Petersen is my absolute favorite incarnation of Will Graham. This guy is the best character of the whole movie. And yes, I do love him more than Edward Norton and Hugh Dancy. Petersen perfectly captures Graham's fragile mindset and noble heroics. Will Graham's essentially a cynical cop who's witnessed some of the worst atrocities of humanity, and throughout the movie he walks the line of being a good guy or being just as bad as the psychos he studies. You learn that Will is a broken man who quit this gig since he's afraid he might grow just as insane as the monsters he hunts. But unlike Hugh Dancy, Petersen has an awe-inspiring arc of coming to grips with himself and saving the innocent, which I did find more interesting than TV Graham's downward spiral. I really like Petersen, since he's a hero worth rooting for and plays off the other characters supremely well. I also was surprised at how funny Stephen Lang was as douchey tabloid reporter Freddie Lowndes. He was pretty humorous. The visuals in this movie are also breathtaking. The scenes are so gorgeous and off-putting that it does make Manhunter look fantastic. But time we address the elephant in the room and talk about what you all must be the most curious about. Hannibal Lecter, played by Brian Cox.
That's the same atrocious aftershave you wore in court 3 years ago.
Yeah, I keep getting it for Christmas.
Did you get my card?
To put it kindly, I think Mr. Cox is pretty good. He's definitely no Hopkins or Mickelson, but his version of Dr. Lecter is quite entertaining. While Hopkins captures the supervillain Hannibal and Mickelson captures the ominous Lecter, Brian Cox is pretty much the arrogant, smug know-it-all Lecter. This guy feels more like the Arkham vs. Riddler. He's a snarky smartmouth who knows he's above everybody, and you really want to punch him in the face. But to be fair, that does make Lecter feel like an actual criminal. He's more grounded in reality, yet does act like a real-world psycho with a god complex. I still love Hopkins more, but I think Brian Cox has earned a lot more respect for his take on the villain as a sadistic wise guy who does have a bite behind his bark.
Your hands are rough. They don't look like cops' hands anymore. And that shaving lotion is something a child would select. It has a ship on the bottle, doesn't it? Don't think you can persuade me with appeals to my intellectual vanity.
But like I said, the fact that this is a total 80s movie does come with drawbacks. Now, I love my unapologetic 80s cheese, but it does sort of date the movie. The Lecter universe is loved due to how timeless it is, and most of the films do feel like that they could happen in modern day. All except for this one, where it could have only been set during the radical 80s. I'm sorry, but it does add a dated quality to this, especially since it's drenched in 80s music, 80s fashion, 80s tech, and even the 80s filming style. The other entries above this one carried on a timeless quality, but this is the one that could have only been in the Reagan years. Although, I do love it because of that reason too, since 80s movies are boss. It just might be a problem for new audiences. Don't be fooled by my hot takes. I still value Manhunter as a fun crime thriller, and I'm so glad it's grown a cult following, because this movie deserves a lot more love than it had when initially released. It's a stupendous cop drama, but an okay horror movie.
Francis?
No. Not Francis. Francis is gone. Francis is gone forever.
Alright, prepare yourselves for a shocking twist. I actually like Ridley Scott's Hannibal sequel.
Boo this man!
Not again! Hannibal was the highly anticipated follow-up to the beloved hit Silence of the Lambs, so there was a ton of interest to see where the kooky cannibal and Agent Starling were to go for the future. Unfortunately, this is the most divisive tale among Harris's collection. This is one of those movies which you either really love or really hate. Fannibals are very torn over the quality of this one, but most critics do drop it under bad turf. Luckily, I am one of the few who did find tons to enjoy in this movie. It's not Oscar-worthy, but it's a pretty haunting terror, which perfectly displays the unleashed power behind Lecter once he's out on the town. In this story, we trail Hannibal Lecter after his great escape from prison prison as he attempts to start a new life as a professor in Italy. However, heroes and villains alike from Lecter's past hunt him down to reward him his overdue comeuppance, leading to wacky hijinks. There are a number of reasons why I prefer this movie over Manhunter, but let's get the obvious highlights out of the way. Anthony Hopkins as a more plot-involved Hannibal, and Gary Oldman as Mason Verger, the man who lost his face. I love the sadistic cripple billionaire Mason Verger. He was one of my favorite villains from the saga, since he's essentially an old rival of Hannibal, and Gary Oldman's performance made him so much fun to watch. Seriously, this dude is such an underrated villain, and you'd be shocked how Sirius Black vanishes into this madman.
Oh, wow! Can you hear? Oh, they sound fantastic.
I suppose I should also discuss Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal, since this is our first entry with him as the main man. But do I even need to compliment how divine he is as the Doc? His Lecter is an award-winning character, and even in the weaker films, he delivers an excellent elegance to such an unnerving predator. The fact that he plays off of Gary Oldman is so entertaining that I think it's the best element of the film.
I guess you wish now you fed the rest of me to the dogs.
No, Mason. No, I much prefer you the way you are.
Incineration.
So yeah, despite the setbacks of this movie, Hopkins remains as perfect as ever as Hannibal, and we got an equally insane antagonist posing as a threat in his own right. So why all the hate? Well, I do agree with some of the bad issues which held this back. Exactly like Manhunter, this movie is so slow. The pacing is so bad in this that it's very easy to get bored and doze off. Ridley Scott tried to cram as much as he could from a long novel, and honestly, some stuff could have been omitted. I swear, every time I watch this flick on TV, they edit out entire segments other than blood and gore. Clarice's reunion with Nurse Barney, while touching, almost always gets deleted on reruns, and the whole consulting scent chemist scene on where Lecter's letter came from is totally pointless. The movie also has a decoy protagonist in Inspector Pazzi, who's built up as a fake-out hero, as most of the plot focuses on him trying to capture Lecter for Mason Verger, and going in depth about his friendship with the killer falling apart when he discovers his true identity. I did grow to like Pazzi after watching this movie a few times, but Scott makes his surprise death so blatant that it lost all impact when it did happen. I'm sorry, but Ridley Scott's foreshadowing is so heavy-handed that it's a more obvious twist than the one in Alien Covenant.
Inferno Pietro Lavinia's body hangs from a bleeding tree.
Observe this piece called the blatant symbolism. Notice the blatant symbolism.
But I'll admit, Pazzi's death scene is pretty cool when Lecter gets real, and is one of the most savage kills of the saga.
What's it to be? Powers in or powers out? I'll decide for you if you'll permit me. Ciao.
Despite having nifty kills and ludicrous terror, the movie does move a tad too slow, and not helping matters is that the producers did purge a few characters and subplots which could have helped save the suspense. Ridley Scott aims for a super art house, visually stunning film style, which has both its lovely imagery and flat-out bizarre narm.
I'm a black guy.
I won't deny that Scott goes for a strange angle in his take on the Hannibal world. Sometimes it's quite dazzling, but even a director as great as the Alien creator couldn't save some of the sillier content of the book. Mason Verger's ultimate plan is to capture Hannibal Lecter and gain revenge for making him ugly by feeding him to his pet wild boars who he raised to eat human flesh. Yeah, I love how Scott wasn't afraid to embrace the disturbing feel of the saga, but some moments were difficult to bring to life onto the big screen. I should also warn you that Jodie Foster does not return as Clarice, but we got Julianne Moore donning her badge, and to be fair, I didn't think she was that bad. Clarice is fine in this story, and I legit love the changes to her in the ending. But that comes later. This movie is simply the hunt for Hannibal, where the doc soon has enough of hiding and returns to America in the second half to resolve a few demons. And I think we can all agree that in spite of the stupid or dull moments, this film has one signature scene which stands out for horror fans everywhere. The brain scene! To refresh your memory, the final act has Hannibal abduct Clarice and her dick boss Ray Liotta so he can confess his love for her and teach her the joys of being a serial killer couple together.
Right.
And this leads to Dr. Lecter having a romantic dinner with his crush, where the main course is Ray Liotta's brain, and he literally rips open his skull and feeds them all a tasty piece of Italian cuisine.
It's good.
Some folks view it as ridiculous, but after watching this entire series, including the TV shows, I can safely say that this fits right into the saga, and is the most memorable bile from an OK thriller. Unpopular opinion, but I got a jolly kick out of the brain scene. It's the creepiest, sickest, and most horrifying thing to occur in this movie, and reminds you why Hannibal is a deadly beast you don't want to offend. Also, I totally prefer Ridley Scott's ending over the books. The largest debate over this flick is Scott's alternate ending, but I despise how the novel handled Clarice, and believe Ridley did her fans a favor changing it. Trust me, the show did it better. I do understand the weaknesses of this one, but I still like it, since I love these characters so much, and found the daring new concepts quite engaging, thanks to the payoff being well worth the wait. Plus, unlike Manhunter, this plot isn't afraid to be a horror movie. Hannibal feels like an intense, scary story, whereas Manhunter was more of an 80s action thriller, which downplays the scares. I would definitely recommend seeing our higher up stories before this one, because only hardcore fanables will defend this as a golden gem. But I do love it. I love seeing how dangerous Lecter is when he's not chained down, or no longer pretending to be normal. To me, this is equally as underrated as Manhunter. It's flawed, but does contain the magic that made Hannibal Lecter an iconic monster. Check it out if you haven't gotten your fill of the Hopkins souffle.
If you touch me, I'll shoot you.
Understood.
Do right and live through this.
Spoken like a true Protestant.
We're at the final three, the flawless victories. Third place goes to the Hannibal TV show. Created by Brian Fuller, the Hannibal series is a prequel journey taking place prior to Red Dragon, where we follow a young Hannibal and Agent Will Graham back when they were total bros solving murder mysteries together. It was sort of a monster of the week type of deal, but the writers did take risks by including complex story arcs and leading us up to the point where Dr. Lecter gets exposed as a serial killer hiding in plain sight. This is one of the greatest TV shows of the 2010s, and single-handedly restored Lecter's image among horror fans after the letdown Hannibal Rising. I never got into this show back when it was new, mostly since I assumed it was just going to be another cash grab where our horror icon would get ruined completely by lame writing and lazy jump scare horror. But I was 100% wrong. The show is fantastic and unforgettable. It took me a while to warm up to the new guy since Hopkins is my definitive Lecter, but I must say, Mads Mikkelsen is an awesome, sinister, playful, and vicious version of Hannibal the Cannibal. Because this is set before he gets arrested, his Lecter is allowed to show how cunning and deadly he is, as he seamlessly blends in with normal society, while moonlighting as a serial killer secretly plotting behind the cast's backs. Fuller portrays Lecter as more of a demon walking amongst mortals. He's made so unsettling by the fact that we know he's a fiendish people eater, but the other characters slowly learn the hard way that this gentleman ain't so gentle. Mads Mikkelsen is my second favorite Lecter, and some argue that he outclasses Hopkins at times. The show also gives us a new Will Graham, played by Hugh Dancy. I still prefer Peterson more, but this new Graham does have his own merit as an equally compelling hero, finding himself struggling to overcome his own mental illness and coming to grips with the fact that his BFF Lecter is not the man who he idolizes anymore. Almost every character from the saga shows up in this show. Sadly, the only exclusions were Clarice Starling and most of the major players from Silence. Yet seeing younger versions of these cool characters from every other tale certainly makes this universe feel well connected. I love Lawrence Fishburne as Jack Crawford. He made the generic angry chief such a badass hero, and this show gave us the greatest moments of television by having Hannibal Lecter versus Morpheus. So epic. We also get many fun performances, reminding us why these characters are so great, including younger versions of Freddie Lowndes, Dr. Chilton, Francis Dollarhide, and even Mason Verger. I love how the show unapologetically embraces the entire series and outlandish setting to impress fans, even from the hated stories. This is a show which truly desires to win over its fan base and make dynamic misadventures out of everything this saga devised. This series can get bone-chilling, not shying away from the twisted atrocities committed by psycho killers. The series frequently relies on showing us what made the saga so terrifying, diving into the minds of serial killers. There are trippy effects and warped cinematography to show us how unhinged murderers are, and their dark perception of the world. Heck, almost every episode even shows us Hannibal's daily routine. Every episode has Hannibal cooking something, and I love this sick style showing how he prepares human meat as these exquisite dishes, then shares them with his friends while they unknowingly dine on people the doc killed. Not only is it haunting for the gore, but it also serves as a reminder of how screwed up Hannibal is. I enjoy how it's never made clear if he gets some sadistic pleasure out of this, or if Hannibal genuinely believes he's being a good friend, sharing his own favorite dishes with close friends, as a gesture of true affection. Small, but subtly creepy. Hannibal isn't the sole source of fear. The killers and other antagonists who he and Will Graham face are shown to be unstable people, some evil, demented, delirious, delusional or even sympathetic villains. While the show embraces scary stuff, it's also not afraid to make the viewer feel a wide variety of emotions. I love how, despite being the main big bad, Hannibal himself is honestly quite fun. The team reminds us that elite Dr. Lecter does have a sense of humor, and Brian Fuller had a lot of fun giving us his trademark gallows humor.
He tells everyone that you are a monster.
Well, in that case, you are dining with a psychopathic murderer, Frederick.
The right one's my winking eye.
I'll give you your license if you never do that again.
Oh, everything's the last time I do everything.
Sadly, the show is not number one, since of course the crazy cat has some nitpicks. Just to be clear, I absolutely love this show and consider Hannibal a phenomenal series that anyone who loves this icon should witness. It's a 10 out of 10 show for me, up there with The Haunting Hour, Twilight Zone, and Justice League. These are some of my biases. First off, I do not care for the character Abigail Hobbs. I'm sorry, but I don't. Abigail starts out as a very interesting girl with tons of deep potential, but I ended up disappointed with her. Abigail is basically every angsty teenager you've ever seen. Hannibal and Will rescue her from her serial killer daddy, but most of her arc is being tugged between the murder husbands. She turns to Hannibal and Will as her new parents, and she becomes a plot device influencing their story as it becomes a struggle over who she's better off with. And I'm just gonna say it, her story arc should have ended back in season 1. Her role in the story concludes very early on, yet for some reason they just keep bringing her back. They do this all the way up to the final episode, and I got tired of seeing her, especially since she's not as deep as the show pretends she is. They get rid of her and bring her back multiple times, and since she's a nothing of a character, I just don't care.
Abigail is gone.
This is a tiny nitpick, but I also couldn't take Hannibal seriously in his enviro suit. Like, I know he does it to prevent any of his DNA being left at a crime scene, but I only complain because he doesn't wear a damn mask. The final season is also very slow. The showrunners grant the series these pretty cool art house imagery in the same vein as Ridley Scott, and while it does look cool, Season 3 overdoses on these effects, to the point where it's hard to tell what's happening in them. I mean, look at this weird montage. Would any of you put it together that this was a love scene?
I don't get it.
There's also this weird Japanese lady who I never got. If you're a film nerd like I, then you might mistake her for Gong Li's character from Hannibal Rising, since she might as well be the same person. But nope, she's not. She's some other Japanese warrior lady with a complicated relationship with Hannibal and seeks to redeem him. But we never learn why, and she waltzes off into the woods, never to be seen again.
I don't get it.
The final story arc also remakes the fan favorite Red Dragon. The show takes a page out of Bates Motel and bases the final arc around events from the hit movie, and while it does have outstanding moments, I didn't fully love it more than Hopkins's take. The Dwarf King Richard Armitage makes for a frightening Red Dragon, and while I did enjoy him for the most part, the only thing I dislike is that he's not sympathetic. Oddly, the show removes all of his tragic backstory and instead chooses to make him more ferocious and animalistic. It's creepy how we finally get to see the Red Dragon persona through the eyes of madness, but I was let down how we didn't feel for the man tied to the demon. It's a small complaint, though I did like the remake's final battle, so it does atone for that miss. And this leads me to my final issue, the infamous cliffhanger ending. Now don't worry, I know it's not the show's fault, but this thrilling ride ends on a super vague note and a confusing stinger. The show teases that there's more to come, but we never get proper conclusion and end on Agent Scully eating her own leg.
I don't get it.
It's simply confusing, and to this day infuriates Hannibals, since we'll never get answers. Thankfully, I do have mercy and acknowledge that these are minor issues from an otherwise wonderful ride. The subtle dread, the grueling filmmaking, the thrilling mysteries, the unexpected twists, the bloody violence, the fun stars, and the gripping acting forms this series into one of the greatest projects with the Lecter brand name. This horror fable was one of the best shows on TV, and it totally earns that achievement. It's so good that it impresses hardcore fans and manages to gain a totally new audience to party at Lecter's haunted house.
What am I about to put in my mouth?
Rabbit.
He should have hopped faster.
Yes, he should have. But fortunately for us, he did not.
And the silver medal goes to Red Dragon. Wowie zowie, I love this movie. This is one of the grandest horror remakes of all time. Everything about this gem is perfect. The acting is great, the horror is great, the narrative is great, the visuals are great, the music is great. All of it is great. Oh, except for Brett Ratner. Brett Ratner. Red Dragon is a remake of the cult classic Manhunter, albeit a much more faithful adaptation to the book. Red Dragon is the same plot-wise to Manhunter, but they approach it in a vastly different angle. While Manhunter focuses on the cop drama and Will's trip, Red Dragon focuses more on the psychological horror and on Francis Dollarhide's trip. This was also the final film marking Anthony Hopkins' run as Dr. Lecter. And yeah, while he does look old enough to be Thor's father, I think he's just as scary here as he was back in his first adventure.
Have you never felt a sudden rush of panic? Yeah, that's the fear we talked about.
The film expands Hannibal's role much more due to the popularity of the villain, and we see his dynamic with his ex-bro Will play out wonderfully. Edward Norton is often cited as the weakest Will Graham, but I only think that's because his arc is kept simpler in favor of delving more into the Red Dragon killer. This Will does not have the struggle of walking the line between good and evil like Peterson or Dancy, but instead he's dealing with the fallout of his bestie betraying him, which is still cool. However, the true star of this pick is the Red Dragon. I don't mean to sound cruel towards Tom Noonan or Armitag's versions, but that's only because this incarnation of the killer is my definitive Red Dragon. How cool is he? He's so cool that he's played by Lord Voldemort! This dude is my favorite take on the antagonist, since the movie brilliantly balances out both his primal savagery side and his conflicted tragic side. The Red Dragon is supposed to have this split personality, but you never quite got that impression with Noonan. Francis Dollarhide has his psychotic, vengeful, evil persona, the Red Dragon, who compels him to kill people to feed the beast. but he also has a human side deep down. Francis, the antisocial abuse victim, desperately trying to find happiness in his depressing life, clinging to the dragon because it gives him strength he never had. Lord Voldemort delivers such an awe-inspiring performance that rivals Hopkins, since he reveals both the deadly nature of the killer, yet somehow gets us to feel for the man broken underneath. Since he gets more screen time, we're allowed to get inside his head as we witness his Beauty and the Beast-esque love story where he grows attached to a blind coworker named Reba. But alas, his dueling personas soon come to blows. What made this guy one of the best villains of the saga is how you go from fearing him to actually feeling pity for him. A lot of folks blow this one off as a regular crime blockbuster, but Voldemort is so amazing as the Red Dragon, and he deserves praise for terrifying us and shockingly making you care about his downfall.
No, I won't give her to you. No. Please, just for a little while. She's nice.
The cop side is also sped up, so we can montage through the police procedurals that dragged in Manhunter, and we're shown more of Will's struggle to solve the case rather than told. I appreciate the modern update to the police segments, as it makes the film feel almost like X-Files, and we gain more of an understanding of how desperate the law is to stop this madman. I feel this movie took all the best elements from both Silence and even Ridley Scott's movie, as there are art house gimmicks, but maintains the thrilling vibe this series is famous for. I know Brian Cox is a good lector, but hearing Hopkins reciting the book scenes just brings out the magic more. I love the bonus scenes added with Hannibal, since it demonstrates how even trapped from behind bars, the Mad Doctor is still just as dangerous as he is outside. Plus, there's a lot of funny moments with him. Some people forget that despite being suave and courteous for a killer, Hannibal is also a troll.
Did you get my card?
I got it, thank you.
So nice of the Bureau's crime lab to forward that. They wouldn't give me a home address.
Never change, Anthony. After the smash hit of Mads Mikkelsen's Hannibal, this movie started to fade away into obscurity since the TV show was able to touch upon everything from the book and had time to slowly walk us through the madness. While Red Dragon did rush some stuff, but honestly to this day, I still see this as the best of the Hannibal sequels. I do love Mikkelsen's take, but alas, I still think Red Dragon is easily superior, since it's a masterful horror. I can't recommend this whole franchise enough, but Red Dragon is a must-see for any horror fan, especially if you want more of Hopkins' flavor. Heck, this spooky story is so good that it didn't always need Lecter to entertain. That's how epic it is. Red Dragon's a 10 out of 10 masterpiece, which isn't solely a good Hannibal sequel, but a holy treasure in its own right, and remains classic. What can be better than this portrait of perfection? Well, here's a hint.
Hannibal, there's someone here to see you. Wants to ask you a few questions. I said you'd probably refuse. A young woman. Says she's from the FBI, though she's far too pretty, if you ask me.
What is her name?
And the best of the best is The Silence of the Lambs. As if you didn't guess.
Toughened your nipples, didn't it?
I may love most of these stories, but it's pretty hard to outdo what many audiences not only consider one of the best horror movies of all time, but one of the top 1001 best movies, period. The Silence of the Lambs has won numerous awards, made a mark on the horror community, made Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster household names, enchanted the globe with these iconic characters, and is all around just a fabulous film. The The plot follows newbie officer trainee Clarice Starling as she attempts to solve the murder case of the ominous Buffalo Bill, a vile serial killer abducting and slaughtering women. So she consults with infamous criminal mastermind Hannibal Lecter for aid, who was Bill's therapist at one point, where she soon plays mind games with the convicted felon, slowly forming a respect towards one another and teaming up to stop Bill before he hurts more innocents. This film's made disturbing because, like I said all throughout, the horror is taking us into the warped mind of a serial killer and shows us how these people view the world, making our noble hero question her own life and if she can handle these demented individuals. Do I even need to say more on how godlike Anthony Hopkins is as Hannibal Lecter? If I thought this guy was still boss in the bad movies, you bet your mouth guards he's even more wicked in the good movies. Lecter is kept more subtle and low-key in this, yet he feels like a shark kept in a tank, as he lives up to his devilish rep.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice chianti.
Jodie Foster's undoubtedly the best Clarice Starling, since she makes this rookie cop feel like an actual person and has a compelling adventure of growing from a scared girl into a hardened badass. Unlike that doggy do, this movie made Clarice a feminist role model, on par with Ellen Ripley and Sarah Connor, but they do so by showing us that she has real obstacles to overcome, other than mean men, and we get to know her as a person. She truly is one of the best heroes of horror, and this movie will make you cheer her on. And lastly, we have Buffalo Bill, played by Mr. Monk's boss. Ted Levine is unrecognizable in this role, and to this day, fans actually debate who was scarier, Hannibal or Buffalo Bill. I still love the Red Dragon more, but Buffalo Bill is no slouch in the sinister psycho department. Buffalo Bill's nightmarish, since he was based on real-life serial killers. He mimics infamous murderers Ted Bundy, Ed Gein, Jerry Brudos, etc., which serves as a grim reminder of the terrors lurking within our own society. The movie goes all out to show you how dangerous serial killers with some grander schemes really are, with both Hannibal proving toxic due to how smart he is at corrupting others or taking advantage of one small error, or through Buffalo Bill's inhumane treatment of his targets and his unhinged mindset. I also like how this movie series glorifies the police and FBI, as it shows how determined these people are to capture maniacs and go through a crap ton of work to locate clues. It does take some pages out of Manhunter and shows us the stressful casework these cops go on, but has fun with Dr. Lecter as you start to question if he truly is friends with Clarice or if they're playing chess master with the other.
And you think if you save poor Catherine, you could make them stop, don't you? You think if Catherine lives, you won't wake up in the dark ever again to that awful screaming of the lambs.
I don't know.
Unlike most horror movies, the scariness is not a one-trick pony. There's psychological horror, emotional horror, violence, gore, fridge horror, sexual horror, and even jump scares. This movie's amazing and has such a timeless feel to it, as you believe the story can take place in any era. You know, unlike that doggy do. What places this title above all is that it's cleverly written, has multiple horror types, is super effective at scaring us, has phenomenal acting, and is eerily grounded more in reality compared to others. Red Dragon and Manhunter go all out on the intense cop drama. Hannibal the show and film are both avant-garde artsy experiences. Hannibal Rising is a supervillain origin, and the Clarice spin-off is crap. But Silence of the Lambs is a more realistic nightmare, diving into the ugly side of the world, while also giving us this idealistic lady holding on to her hope and fighting to overcome the terror haunting her. What made this an incredible horror movie is one vital element. It was different. Back when horror movies were only mindless dumb slashers and gore fests, Silence of the Lambs came along to show us how scary stories can be deep and haunt us with heavy concepts other than just having people die. This movie was a massive game changer for the horror genre, and that's why I agree that this tale is the best nightmare of the Hannibal saga.
Thank you, Clary. Thank you.
And that concludes my ranking. So, what did you think? Do you agree with my list? Did I change your tune on any stories? What's your ranking of this delightful theater? Well, feel free to post in the comments, since if you'll excuse me, I'm having an old friend for dinner. I brought the KFC! Exquisite.
Right.